Hi, everyone. I hope you are all well. Thank you for being here today. I am Lorena Hakak, and together with Solange Gonçalves, we are going to mediate this webinar. Next week, on September 3rd, will take place the first Brazilian meeting in family and gender economics, which will be virtual. Sign up to receive the link to participate. I'll put the registration link in the chat. This webinar will be divided in two parts. The first is a presentation by our guest, and then we will open for questions and answers. Attendees can send questions through the Zoom chat, and at the end, if they want, the attendees themselves can ask their questions to the guest. In order not to have sound problems or any other issue, please turn off the sound as well as your cameras. Well, today we are pleased to welcome Professor Francisco Pino. He will talk about sexism in economics. Shall we get to know better our guests? Francisco has a PhD in economics from Boston University. He is assistant professor of economics at the University of Chile and is a research affiliate. His research is focused on understanding the impact of political institutions on economic as well as political outcomes, particularly in the context of underrepresented groups. His work has been published in the AJ Applied Economics, the Journal of Development Economics, and the Review of Economics and Statistics. Hi, Francisco.
Hi, Lorena. Hi, Solange.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. You are our first international guest. When you are ready, you can start.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for this invitation to present our work. This is joint work with Valentina Paredes from the University of Chile and Daniele Paserman of Boston University. Let's start. So let me start by acknowledging that the field of economics has been, let's say, elusive for women, to put it mildly. In fact, despite an increase in recent decades in the share of female faculty, the number have stagnated in the last years. Just to give you some figures, these figures are for the US, but I don't think it's different for the rest of the world. So if you think of the share of female assistant professors, the share is around 25%, and has been steadily for the last 30 years, more or less. Associate professors have been increasing, but they account for 25% of the total. And for full professors, the issues get worse, and the women are only 10% of full professors. So there's abundant evidence. I will discuss the details later, that women face unequal treatment in promotion and credit. They get less credit for co-authorship. They have a harder time publishing their work. They get worse teaching evaluations. Seminars are typically less friendly for them, and they even face outright hostility and misogyny. Okay, and why this is relevant? Of course, it's not only relevant because of concerns of equality or justice, right? But it matters because underrepresentation might constrain the types of questions that are asked, you know, and it might fail to take into account the full range of perspective on specific issues. Okay, so what we do in this paper? So we conducted a large-scale survey among Chilean university students in economics and other fields to analyze whether economics students are more sexist than students in other majors. Okay, so we take advantage of one key issue of the Chilean system, which is that students, when they enter the university, they choose jointly the major and college, right? This is instead of the system in the US, where you first choose the college where you go, right, and later on, maybe 2 years after that, one or 2 years, you choose the major. And this is important because this will allow us to disentangle the two possible effects. One is selection, right? So are people just more gender biased when they want to study economics, when they just go to economics, or the causal or treatment effect, if you want, which is whether there is something about studying economics, of economics training, that leads people to be more gender biased. Okay, so that's going to be the crucial ingredient in this analysis, and the methodology we're going to use is differences in differences, where we're going to compare econ students versus students in other fields, and we're going to compare students during the first year or just almost prior to the first year against students in year 2 and above. Okay, we are going to conduct also a between subject analysis and also a within subject analysis. We're going to use an instrumental variable. I'll explain the details later. Okay, so why gender bias might be prevalent in economics? There are several reasons. So let me give you an idea. So first, we can think of economics might be perceived as a high-paying field. So, for instance, at least in Chile, economics is typically taught with management. So people associate economics with management, finance, etc. So this perception of economics being highly well paid, might attract individuals, which in turn might have more traditional gender roles. Okay, so that might be one explanation. Also, exposure to economics itself, the classes, the school, may lead to more gender bias. Typically, in economics, there's a small number of female faculty relative to other fields. Of course, this is always relative to other fields, and typically there's a low share of women among economic students. This varies across schools, etc. But typically, it's not one of the fields that you would think of, with a lot of female students. Then we can think that economic training may lead students to develop more market-oriented views about economic policy, okay? And therefore, they might identify more with the right wing on social and economic issues. That could be another reason. And finally, is just the field of economics itself the culprit, okay? And here, I want to give you a little survey, a little poll. So let me read this quote by Gary Becker. This is from his book, A Treatise on the Family. It says, if women have a comparative advantage over men in the household sector when they make the same investments in human capital, an efficient household with both sexes would allocate the time of women mainly to the household sector and the time of men mainly to the market sector. Okay, so now I want to give you a little poll, and I would ask you to answer this for me. Just a second. Okay, it's going to be in the chat, and you can just click and vote whether you think the quote I just read is neutral. So if the assumption is true, the conclusion logically follows, or it's actually a sexist quote, meaning it reveals economics' hidden bias, uses math to just promote a specific social order. Okay, do you see the survey? Can you vote? Great. I'm going to give you just a minute. I'm going to put up the quote again in case you wanna see it. That's a quote again. I'm going to give you just 1 minute. Okay, just a couple of seconds more. Okay, I'm gonna show you the results. Here we go. Okay, can you see? Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay, so out of how many? Out of 25, 19 of you said that the quote is sexist and 6 said the quote is neutral. I can tell you now that we've been presenting this paper for a while, and you know, this is actually, this is more people here that agree that the quote is sexist. That doesn't surprise me, of course, because this is a group on gender and family economics, right? So that doesn't surprise me, but I can tell you that in depending on the audience, you could get eventually half and half. And this is to show you that, you know, the issue is you know, it's up for debate. People tend to debate about whether this quote is really sexist. We're going to use throughout the talk the term sexism, gender bias, interchangeable, okay, or traditional gender roles. Actually, sometimes we're going to be talking about traditional gender roles, meaning, you know, gender bias or sexism, okay? But in fact, this will matter for when we interpret the results. It's important to keep this in mind. Okay. Okay, so let's go back. And so is the discipline itself the culprit? And actually, following this quote, what we can think, there might be you know, some stuff in the discipline itself that is responsible for this gap, right? So some economics theories that we take as kind of granted, if you take them in the most simplistic way, they could lead to more gender biased views. So for instance, if you think you know, in labor, right, in labor economics, if markets are efficient, then workers are paid their marginal product. So any discrimination or any differences in wages must be due to differences in productivity, if this were the case, right? If markets are efficient. In fact, in competitive market, discrimination cannot exist in the long run. Right, so and in fact, the theory of comparative advantage, the one that is used in the quote I was just showing you, you know, if you apply it to the household sphere, it can be used to justify the traditional gender norms as the quote was expressing, right? So it could be that it is what we teach actually that that makes people be more sexist or to hold more traditional gender roles. Okay, so let me give you a quick preview of the results. So we're going to find in our analysis that economics students are more gender biased than students in other fields. And I had to yet define how we measure gender bias. I will do it in a couple of slides, okay? Some of the gap, now thinking of the difference between, you know, selection and training, some of the gap is upon entry, but it increases with exposure to economics, okay? And that's particularly the case for male students. Okay, that's for the between analysis. The results are broadly confirmed in the within analysis. And when we talk about mechanisms in this paper, we're not going to be able to disentangle all the mechanisms here. That probably would be a subject for further research. But we can at least say that political ideology seems to explain a lot of the gap upon entry, but not you know, the gap that happens with exposure. Okay, and finally, exposure to female students and female faculty tend to attenuate some of the bias. Okay, in terms of related literature, there's a lot of literature covering some of these I mentioned during the introduction. In fact, the figures I was giving you are from Shelley Langberg and her co-authors. She's been working a lot on this throughout the last probably couple of decades. This is the literature I was referring to during the introduction, the unequal treatment in tenure and promotion, credit for co-authorship, etc., standard for publication. And the one of our hostility is the paper of Alice Wu. I'll probably will say some words about that later on. There are some papers that do not find much difference. These are a couple of papers by Hammermesh and co-authors. And this paper relates to other papers trying to see whether studying economics has some impact on other outcomes. Like, so economics, people that study economics tend to be less cooperative in experiments, and they're more likely to maximize profits. My daughter is here. And exposure to economic training. There's some papers that are looking at the behavior of judges, and they find that the exposure to economic training affects the way judges rules, like typically against the regulation or harsher sentences. Okay, so our paper is related to that literature as well. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of the background of the Chilean university system. Probably we're from the region, so I don't need to tell you too much about where Chile stands in terms of GDP, etc. But what is important is that Chile is relatively close in terms of the OECD average in terms of gender attitudes. So here we measure these are the usual questions that you see in the World Value Survey, whether children suffer when the woman works, or when jobs are scarce, the men should have the first right to get a job. These are the usual standard values questions that you see in the World Value Survey. And on those answers, Chileans do similar to the average of the OECD. Okay, this is what I already mentioned, that university students choose at the same time, where to study and what to study. Okay, so they are enrolled at the beginning, say in economics at the University of Chile, and that's from the get-go. What is taught in Chile is actually not economics, but rather something that is called ingeniería comercial, or commercial engineering, which is a merge of business and economics. We're going to be calling it B&E, okay, in the tables and in the figures. Okay, so it's basically a mixture of business and economics. I was curious, in Brazil, you start immediately with economics, or it's also something like this?
Yes.
Economics immediately. Okay. Yeah. No. Here. So here, typically, it's ingeniería comercial. It's like business and economics, and then you have you specialize in either economics or business. But still, this major is the one that has by far more courses in economics than any other field a major you could think of. Engineering, of course, law, etc. I'll show you. We have other fields as well. So it's a 10-semester program, and the majority of classes are economics, but there are other stuff like general interest, of course, finance, strategy, other stuff. Okay, and in the universities we're looking at, we have a mixture of public-private universities in Santiago and in other regions of Chile. And typically, these are the standard textbooks that are used in these courses. Okay. So about the survey that we conducted, we have 5 waves plus the pilot. So let me explain you. So the total is around 3,700 students. This is an online survey. What we did first, we sent this to first-year students. This was almost, so prior, the pilot was prior to any, any contact with the university, any classes whatsoever. Wave 1 was between March and July. So the academic year in Chile is from March to December. So this was throughout the first semester of first-year students. And we did it again, so this was 2017. We did it again in 2018 for first-year students, okay? And then in wave 2, we contacted students in year 2 and above. So these would be students that are either in their 4th semester or upper in their career, right? So same universities participated, same majors, and so on. And then we have these waves 4 and 5. This, what we did here is we follow up students. So wave 4 is following up students in the pilot, and wave 5 is following students in wave 3. So with these waves, we're going to have the within subject analysis. Okay, so they will be included, of course, in the between, but these are the waves that will allow us to do the within subject analysis. Okay, so that's the survey. So we've been doing this for a while, as you can see. Well, I told you already about the sample. So we have around 3,700 students. We tend to have a larger share of female students, and it is positively selected in some characteristics, especially in parents' characteristics, parents' education, and students' test scores. Okay, that's it's a little bit selected on that. Around a quarter our sample is students of business and economics, and we have also a lot of students in engineering, accounting, law, sciences in general, psychology, etc. So we have other fields. Okay. So what's the structure of the survey? What we asked is a battery of questions trying to understand gender biases, sexism, etc. You'll see now exactly what we mean with gender bias. So first, we had a implicit association test. I don't know if you are familiar with that. I'll explain a little bit in a couple of seconds. Then there came a battery of world value survey style questions on gender roles, beliefs about mathematical ability, etc., and beliefs about sources of the gender pay gap. I'll explain in a second. I'll show you all the measures we have. Okay. Then there were some questions about sexism directly. There's one measure of sexism that is called ambivalent sexism inventory. I'll explain again in a couple of in the next slide actually. And then finally some information about the student, gender, age, high school, etc. And some socioeconomic background. That was the structure of the survey. It was more or less the same throughout all waves. Okay. So this is how we measure gender bias, okay? We're going to have 9 separate measures of gender bias. The first 2 are this implicit association test. So the idea with this test is trying to tease out the implicit response of students to the association between either gender and science or gender and career. So the idea of this test is designed, it's been used by psychologists a lot. It has some criticism, but the key feature is that it tries to get at the implicit response, okay? Instead of all the other measures that are going to be explicit, people can know they're being asked about sexism, for instance. This one tries to tease out the implicit association that people might have. So they argue that it's more difficult to trick, you know, more difficult to lie about it, okay? Then we have these 2, by the way, so once you took the survey, you were randomized on whether to answer the gender and science test or the gender and career. So actually this we have for half of the sample. Then all the rest were for everyone, and we have hostile sexism and benevolent sexism. These 2 make the ambivalent sexism inventory. So hostile sexism is the usual one, right? The negative feelings toward women. I can show you. I have time. Well, briefly, I'll show you. These are the usual questions of this inventory. Women are easily offended. Women try to gain power by controlling men, etc., etc. Okay, so it's five questions we had. I think the total inventory is 7, but we restricted it to 5. okay? And the other one, the benevolent sexism, is the chivalrous ideology that offers protection and affection to women who adopt conventional gender roles. So this would be a typical question would be, even when a man accomplishes many goals in his life, he can never feel truly complete unless he has the love of a woman. That's the typical question. There are 5 of them, okay? But that's a measure of benevolent sexism. Okay, so those are pure sexism, if you want, right? So the others are more. So we have one for gender roles, traditional gender roles, and this is the World Value Survey type question. So a working mother can establish a relationship as warm and solid with their children as a non-working mother. That would be the typical one, and we have several of them. Okay. Then we have one that we call gender roles proactive or normative. These are also the same type of questions, but here these are questions where we are asking whether society should take a more proactive role in terms of promoting equality. For instance, this one: men should assume a greater degree of responsibility in domestic work than they currently do. Okay, so those would be the type of questions included here. And then we have a couple of questions on beliefs about gender differences in math. I'll show you quickly. So it is possible that men are currently more skilled in math than women, and in general, men are better than women in math. Okay, these are the questions that we include there. And then so we asked them. We told them, in Chile the wage gap, the gender wage gap, is around 20%. What do you think are the causes of this gap? And we gave them alternatives, and so here we have sort of classified that. So this measure number 8 is going to tell us whether people think that the gender pay gap is due to discrimination, and 9 is going to tell us whether they believe that the gender pay gap is due to skills and preferences. Okay, so that's there, and of course here it's more debatable if we really think it's sexism. It could be more gender roles, etc. Okay, so we're going to be calling this sexism in general. We then create one single aggregate score that takes into account, it's the principal component of all the other 9 measures. Okay, this is to take into account the issue of multiple hypothesis testing. So this is going to give us the aggregate measure of sexism or gender bias. Okay, we also do a correction for multiple hypothesis testing. I'll tell you, these are in the appendix of the paper. Measures are of course a bit correlated, but they don't measure exactly the same, and so they are useful. They are all capturing some bites of sexism and gender bias. Okay, so quick descriptive stats, and then I'll go to the results. So first thing, to try to test the validity of our instruments, right? So are men more gender biased than women? The answer is yes, and it is true for almost all our measures. So let me explain what this table shows. So here you have all the measures plus the aggregate measure, the score. You have the average of for each measure. All these measures are standardized, okay? So these are standard deviations. So this one would be that female students are 0.11 standard deviation less, below 0, right? So minus 0.11 standard deviations, that's the average of this test, while men are 0.13 standard deviations above 0, okay? The important thing is the difference, and here you have it in 2 columns. So column 3 is without controls, column 4 is with controls. And controls are all the characteristics I told you: type of school, parents' background, scores at the test that they have to take to enter university, grades in high school, etc. We have all those controls, and so column 3 is without those, and column 4 is with those. Okay. And you see that in almost all measures, not much for the implicit test, but for all the others, men seem to be more sexist than women. So it seems that this is measuring something, right? It seems that this kind of makes sense. Okay, and we're going to be comparing to these differences throughout the paper. Okay, so now we get to the results, and I'll divide the results in 5. So first, we're going to just look at the comparison of economics and non-economic students, okay, the most basic one. So the table has more or less a similar structure, but now instead of men and women, we're comparing econ, let's think of econ students and other students, okay? And again, for all students, we try to compare the measures. Not all of them are significant. All of them seem to be positive. So positive meaning econ students are more sexist than non-econ students. Not all of the differences are significant. If you look at the aggregate score, what we see is that you know, it's more or less 0.2 standard deviation more sexist, or 0.15. So that would be around 1/4 of the male-female gap. Okay, that's the size, if you want, of the difference. Okay, between econ and non-econ students. Okay, and then what you see here is the difference between male and female students. And you see that both of them, in both cases, you see that econ students are more sexist than non-econ students, both for male and for female students, okay? A little bit more so for male. Okay, and well, so I'm not going to be commenting too much on each individual measure. I will try to focus on the score, also in the interest of time. Okay, now let's go to the between subject analysis. So what we did here, as I mentioned in the introduction, is a difference in difference analysis, comparing econ versus non-econ, and first year versus students in year 2 and above. Okay, and here we're going to use all the samples. So that's the benefit of doing this. We're going to use the whole sample. We don't worry too much about attrition and so on. Okay, we do have to identify an assumption. We should assume that there's no differential selection of students into economics across cohorts. We have some evidence supporting this. What we do is basically do the same difference in difference analysis, but now with the dependent variable as being one of the controls in our regression. So it doesn't seem to be a difference, a differential difference, you know, in all these control variables. So it doesn't seem to be much selection on observables. There could be still unobservables, but at least on observables, we don't see much of selection. The other one is parallel trends. Unfortunately, we just see the students at the entrance of the university. We cannot interview them before that. So it could be that students who choose to major in economics also are more prone to be gender biased over time, and that we cannot really test. But what we can do is to do an instrumental variable strategy, taking the advantage of the feature of the Chilean admission system. So basically, in order to be admitted to one university in Chile, you have to take a standardized test, like the SAT test in the US. And that's all that matters, okay? There's no letter of recommendation, there's nothing like that. So you just take the test, there's a cutoff score for each major college, right? And you apply, and then if you get in, you are accepted. And if you don't, you are either in a waiting list or you are rejected and you have to go to your next option. I'll explain a little bit, if I have time later, I'll explain the instrumental variable strategy that we implement. Okay, but basically that's it. So I'm going to show you, for this, I'm going to show you the results in figures. I think it's nicer to see them like this. So let me explain what this means. So here in each of these sets of bars are each of the measures. Again, at the right is the aggregate score, and then the light bar is what the average for first year. So this is you know, comparing econ students in their first year to non-econ students in their first year. Okay, that would be the light blue bar, while the dark blue bar is comparing econ students in years 2 and above with non-econ students in year 2 and above. Okay, and then the number that you see on top is the difference in difference. Okay, with the standard errors in parentheses. Okay. So this is for all students. And what we see here, we see that there is some selection. So you see in some cases, in some of our measures, notably sexism, you see that first-year students in econ seem to be more sexist to begin with, right, than non-econ students. And then also in other measures, so in our aggregate score as well. And then you also see that this is true for students in year 2 and above. You see that they are also more sexist than non-econ students. But now the diff in diff coefficient fails to be significant in all these measures. It's positive throughout, right? But it fails to be significant. Well, except here, right? This is almost a 0. So this is like almost 0.1 standard deviation, but it fails to be significant. Okay. So there seems to be a treatment effect, although we cannot estimate it with precision. When we look at males, there you start seeing some significant differences. So let me get to the aggregate score. So again, this is telling us, so the light bar is the difference in first years, right? And there doesn't seem to be a significant difference between econ and non-econ student, but it's students, while there's some significant difference between econ and non-econ years 2 and above students. And actually the difference now is significant at 5%. This would be a 5%, okay? So this is around a treatment effect of around 0.2 standard deviations in the aggregate measure, okay? And if we look at which measures are the ones that seem to be driving the results, it seems that benevolent sexism it's the one. There's something going on also to discrimination, but I have to say here immediately that when you correct for multiple hypothesis testing, these don't survive. Okay, so because we have 9 measures, so we have a lot of hypotheses, so they don't survive. But of course, the aggregate score is not affected by multiple testing because it's an aggregate score. Okay, so this is not affected by multiple hypothesis testing. So this result stands. Okay, so this is the one of the main results. So there seemed to be a treatment effect of studying economics for male students. Okay, not much of selection, but rather of the treatment of studying economics itself. Okay, while for female students we don't see much going on there. So again, going to the aggregate score, we seem to see some evidence of selection. So female students in their first year seem to be more sexist than econ students, than non-econ students. And there's a comparable difference for students in year 2 and above, making the diff in diff coefficient very treatment effects of studying economics for female students, some evidence of selection. Okay, there's some evidence of selection. Okay, so to summarize, so econ students seem to be somewhat more biased upon entry, but the differences are relatively small. The gap becomes more pronounced among students in year 2 and above, but again, for the whole, for the full sample, we don't see significant results. For males, we do. And the difference in difference coefficient is typically around 1/6 and 1/4 of the raw male-female differential. Okay, and that's statistically significant for men. Okay, we do some checks, and this is not driven by one single measure. So we do the robustness of excluding, one measure at a time. We exclude psychology. You might think, okay, because psychology is there, you're getting the results. So we exclude psychology, we exclude engineering, we exclude hard sciences, physics, and so on. We exclude other social sciences, psychology, well, I already mentioned law. We do all the check, and it doesn't seem to be driving the results. Okay, so let's go now to the within subject analysis. So the idea here is to try to address the concern, that we might have unobservable differences across cohorts. Okay, so what we do in the within subject analysis, because we have a smaller sample, it's going to be a much smaller than the between. So first, I'm going to show you the results with the pooled OLS, just to be able to compare to the previous estimates. Then we will do a regression including individual fixed effects. So that would be a sort of first differences regression. And then to take into account attrition, we're going to do a Heckman selection correction, okay? And what we're going to do, if, well, I can tell you more details later, but we need exclusion restriction. So we use as exclusion restriction and as an instrument for the first stage, whether the students gave us their phone number. So we asked them to give us some contact information. They could give us their email. So, well, the email we had it, but they could give us also the phone number, and that we use as an instrument for the selection equation in the Heckman correction. Okay, so those are the results I'm going to show you. So this table is a little bit different. Here I'm showing you some selected variables. Okay, remember we still have the 9 measures plus the aggregate score, but I'm just to be able to read the table better, I'm just showing you five of the measures plus the score. And let me guide you through the table. So this is the averages for first-year students, then second-year students. This is the differences in difference without the fixed effects, so the pooled regression, just to compare to the previous results. Then we include the fixed effects, and then we do the Heckman correction. Okay, that's the structure. This is for the whole sample. Then we do it for men and women separately. Okay, so focusing on the difference in difference, and let me focus on the score. So this would be the previous the equivalent to the previous analysis. So we see a positive coefficient, but again not statistically significant. When we add fixed effects, the coefficient shrinks a little bit and is still not significant. But when we do the Heckman correction, we get a lot of more precision. This would be for the whole sample, and this seemed to be driven by men again, as in the previous analysis. But we fail to find significant results when we do just the fixed effect model. When we account for attrition is when we get the significant results. So the coefficient is slightly, it's comparable to the previous one. If you remember, it was 0.18, I think the effect. Now it's 0.20, 0.2 standard deviation, and it's significant at 5%. So that's more or less similar. Here for women, we do seem to get some more treatment effect. Okay. So those are the results for the panel data. I just repeat. So they seem to confirm the between analysis. We do get some treatment effect for. So let me show you what we do of robustness checks. So we do mainly 2 things. One, we want to account for the MeToo movement. Why? I'll show you actually the timing of our survey. I'm going to go back to the timing of our survey, and I'm going to add some other key dates there. So as you can see here, so I told you a little bit about Alice Wu's work. So this is the paper that looks at these blogs, econ job market rumors, and she makes an analysis, a text analysis of the comments on female and male economists, and what she finds is outrageous. Is that you know, all the comments for male economists are typically about, you know, their work, etc., but all the comments about female economists are about how the looks and etc., and how she dresses and stuff of that sort. So that was a very relevant paper that came out around here. So at the beginning of our wave 2. In any case, and this is close to the start of the MeToo movement in the US. So in any case, we don't think this matters much for our context, the Chilean context. It's probably that people were not aware of this at that time, okay? But next year, so 2018, we had our own MeToo movement. So there were some strikes. So in universities, our university was on strike for a while, for a month or so. So that took its toll, and that was, you know, in the middle of our wave 3. And also, so at the beginning in January 2019, so we presented the first results of our paper at the AEA, and surprising to us, that took some People took some notice in Chile. We had a couple of interviews from newspapers, so we were worried that might have an effect as well on our last wave. This is wave 5, the one the follow-up. Okay, so this is what we have. So we were worried about this, and we wanted to take this into account. So what we do is we re-estimate the model, not including stuff that happened after, the MeToo movement. So basically we include waves 0, 1, and 2, okay, the pilot and waves 1 and 2. And we want to see what happens, okay? And actually what happens is that our results are even stronger, okay? So actually we get a treatment effect for male students that is about 58% larger than when we use the whole sample, okay? So if anything, it seems that the results are stronger if we focus on the pre-MeToo movement data, okay? Then I already mentioned this, the IV analysis. So here what we do is we compare students, all students that applied to economics, and because of the score, some students were able to get in, some students were not. So we basically instrument whether they studied economics if the score that they got was enough to get them in the university with the lowest score in our sample. Okay, that's the instrument basically, and the results are much noisier. Well, it's an IV, so the results are much noisier, but they seem to be, they confirm our results in the sense that they are in the same direction, but they are much noisier. We don't get significance for any of the results. Okay, so that's IV analysis. Finally, the last thing I want to show you before we get to the discussion, it's a little bit of mechanisms. We do some things. I can stop a little bit in some of them. So we want to see whether the effect is stronger when you are more exposed to being in economics. Okay. So what we do is we split the effect into being in second year and then being in third year and above. We could do it fourth, fifth, and so on, but our sample gets smaller and smaller. So what we do is just split between second and third year and above. And actually, we don't find much evidence of exposure increasing gender bias. Actually, the results for year 3 and above are similar to the ones we get for year 2. So it seems that being 2 years studying economics seems to be enough, and then nothing happens. No, it doesn't increase, but it doesn't decrease either. Okay, so it stays there. So it doesn't seem that exposure it's doing too much then after second year. Okay. When we look at when we interact with the share of female faculty, it seems that it also moderates the effect, particularly for female students. Okay, so in fact the effect is larger for students who had not been exposed to many female faculty. Okay, but that's true particularly for female students, and we find something similar for the share of female students now. So this will be the number of peers that these students had. And actually, there's no effect for male students. There's nothing, so it doesn't moderate the effect at all, but it does for female students. So the effect I was showing you before, the no treatment effect, seemed to be a combination of an effect when you see female students with few peers, and no effect when you see female students with lots of peers. Okay, so it seems that it matters whether you have lots of peers studying with you economics. Okay, but this is true for female students, not so much for male students. And then we try to rationalize this, and actually the psychology literature has some clues for this. And so gender bias is one of the biases that it seems not to get better by socializing, because we already do socialize between men and women. It's not like, racism, right? So maybe you are in a ghetto and don't interact with people from the other race, and then you suddenly start interacting and you say, oh, like, this guy is reasonable, so on, and biases can decrease. With gender bias, it doesn't seem to be to be the case. It doesn't seem that more interaction will actually reduce bias. Okay. Finally, regarding political ideology, I already mentioned this in the introduction. In fact, if we control for ideology, it does attenuate the effect of selection, but it doesn't attenuate the effect of treatment. Okay, it doesn't do anything for the treatment. I mean, it does something. Sorry, it's attenuated, but it's still significant. I mean, the result's still there. It doesn't kill the result of the treatment of studying economics. Okay. So let me now conclude. I think I'm almost on time. So what we have done here is to provide evidence of the relevance of explicit and implicit biases against women among students. In economics, this is relative to other fields. We find evidence that econ students are more biased already when they start studying economics. But also that gap becomes more relevant when along their studies. Okay, and that's particularly the case for male students. This comes from the between survey analysis, and the longitudinal analysis seem to confirm those results. And I think what is relevant, the relevant takeaway here is that exposure to female peers and faculty seem to attenuate the effect, mostly for female students, though. Regarding takeaways, so because the effect doesn't seem to change after year 2, it seems that teaching introductory economics is crucial. Okay, it seems that it really can have an impact. The teaching that the students get during the first 2 years. And we want to emphasize the issue of being careful of the hidden, or maybe not so hidden, right, biases in the material that we use when teaching, in the examples. You know, there's been some discussion on this, on the how many women appear on economic textbooks, right? So that matters. And I already mentioned this: female faculty can moderate the effect. And of course, if it were all selection, it doesn't mean that we had nothing to do, right? We can do some outreach. We have to explain better what we as economists do in the real world, and maybe attract a broader range of people to the profession. And with this, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisco. Okay, we have some questions. The chat. I want to leave. I will open everyone. Let me see if I can do.
I can start answering the chat if you want. In the meantime.
Yes, no, maybe
the person can turn on the microphone and yes, do the question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so I think that the first one is Dolores. Dolores, I don't know, she had a question about the panel, the longitudinal data that you have. So I think that's it's already okay. Paula, do you want to do your question?
Dolores is.
Dolores, if you want to do some specific question about the longitudinal data, you can turn on your microphone.
Yes.
Okay.
Francisco, first of all, congrats for the work. It's a very interesting. I have seen a previous version when I think Valentina presented for 2 years ago in the American Economic Association. I have a related question. As your presentation, I see you have information about the students.
Yes.
You need to ask for research ethical committee approval to have this, and
Yeah,
what kind of demands they do to have this research approved.
Yes, yes, yeah, we did. We had the approval of the ethical committee of the school. I saw your question. So yes, they were very worried about privacy and etc. And not only because of the longitudinal component, but also we merged the data with administrative data regarding the SAT type scores, right, and so on. So there were lots of things that they asked us to do. So when we conducted the survey, we do ask for their ID number, right? But that's never in our computer. So this is in the survey server, and basically from there we directly send the information to this agency that has the test scores, but without the survey questions. So they knew who answered our survey, but they didn't know what they answered, right? Because they only had they didn't have the coding of the answers. So we send just the identification number. They merged all the administrative information, so we had all combined. And then we anonymize, and then we download the data and we work with the data. So I've never seen the data with the identification number. And once we had that, again from the server, we could send again the survey once a year passed. So that's how we did it. But yeah, definitely was a worry. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I have a question, Solange? Francisco, when a student apply for a major in a university, how many possibilities he can choose?
10, up to 10.
So I can, for example, student can choose 10 universities?
Right. So he can apply to, or she can apply to economics at Universidad de Chile, economics at Católica, economics at Universidad de Concepción, and so on, up to 10 alternatives.
Up to 10.
And if you don't get to the first one, you go to the next one, and so on. And once you get to one, it stops, right? It's I think the Boston mechanism. I forget, but I think it's the Boston mechanism.
Yes. Oh, but 10 possibilities, it's a lot.
It's quite a bit. Yeah. Yes. Not everyone actually fills out all the 10 alternatives. Yeah.
But it's worse for the student not to fill the 10 options.
If you have a good score, you are in advance. Actually, these are publicized. The cutoffs, the historic cutoffs. So this change over time, right? But you more or less know if you were a good student, that you're gonna get in the choice you want. So you might apply to 2 or 3 just to be on the safe side. But if you're uncertain, then you might use your 10 options. Yeah.
Okay. Who's next?
So
Paula?
Paula is the next one. Could you do your question, Paula? Paula, are you here?
I see the question. I can start answering in the meantime. And
okay.
So the question is about how competitive is the university of the survey. So we had seven universities. It's a bit of a mixture of public universities, private universities, and also universities in Santiago and in the other regions of Chile. There are some that are very selective, some that are not so much. So it's a bit of a mixture. But we do have the most selective and some that are not so not so selective. And about the outcomes, there's a question about information of students when they graduate, labor market variables and so on. So we don't, because then we will have to wait for a while to have the results. So we thought about that. But we would have to wait for quite a bit. And what we do have, and we haven't used much actually, is we ask them expectations about labor market. Say, once you graduate, what do you think is going to be your salary? How long will it take you? How long will it take you to find a job? Actually, we also ask, following another paper, how long would in 10 years, do you think you're going to be married and stuff like that? So we do have some questions about expectations of the future, but unfortunately, we don't have the actual outcomes. Okay, apparently she cannot unmute the microphone. I would be curious to know what you're thinking about, and I think that there are some interesting things to see about outcomes in the long run. Yeah.
Lorena, Paula is muted.
No. Got it. I wasn't able to unmute my mic. I'm sorry about that. Just to congrat you for the great paper and presentation, and it's great to have a man engaged with such a relevant issue for us in the profession. And this question was about mainly if this prior selection that you identify influences the choices. We see very different diversity in female and male representation in research fields, and also in the way in the courses they choose to follow at the end of the university. So I was more curious about that. It would be nice to see the result.
I agree. I mean, it's very interesting to see the paths, basically the different paths that people follow. I think we said that we were going to. So I'm thinking of the follow-up sample. Okay, it's a small one, but at least we told them we were going to contact them up to 3 times. We have done so once, so eventually we can contact them in the future. So that's that option still open. Yeah.
Okay. Who is next? Lucilene?
Is Lucilene? Is she unmuted?
Oh, I allow everyone to unmute.
Okay, so Pino, if you want to read, or I can continue reading.
I see that. I see it. It's about the other fields basically that we have.
Yeah.
I think I have a table on that, so I can show you. Let me see. I think I have one. I hope. But it's basically engineering is the largest one. It's somewhere here. Engineering, law. Well, it's actually here. It's accounting, engineering, law, psychology, sciences. This is like physics, biology, chemistry, and we have some other. We have some architecture, sociology. But those are very small. Okay, so the main ones are basically engineering, law, sciences, and psychology. Those are the main ones we're comparing to. So the way we did it, we wanted to make sure, so we contacted universities. We wanted to make sure that economics was there, was engaged. We had to do it like school by school. So it was quite painful to run this survey. So 7 universities, school by school, then asking, you know, can you send this email about the survey and so on. So we had to do it one by one. By the way, this is a slide where we do the check excluding one major at a time, and you see that the result stays there. It's slightly smaller when we exclude, for instance, psychology. Psychology is typically the major where you have the least sexist people. And once we exclude it, we get a slightly smaller coefficient, but still the difference in difference is still significant. Okay, but anyway, that's the answer. Those are the main other fields considered.
Mm-hmm.
We are having a problem with the microphones. Lorena, it's possible to turn on or not?
Yes, I allow everyone to participate to unmute themselves. I don't know why.
The next question is from Paula, again, if Paula could access.
Paula.
Yeah. It's a question about the teacher, the gender of teacher.
Yes, just that you mentioned that the introduction to economics was a relevant course. And if you have the gender of the teacher, you could do some heterogeneity there.
So the analysis, when we look at faculty, what we do is we gathered information on how many female faculty each school had. The only problem is that we cannot, so we didn't get authorization to ask students for their, if you want, their records on which courses they took in each semester. So we don't have information on the actual number, so the actual lecturer that they had for each course they took, right? I think we have it for like one wave where we managed to do it, but only one school, I think. We don't. So what we do is we either ask students. I think we did it in two ways. We ask students to tell us, you know, throughout your career, throughout your major, what's the share of female faculty that you have. That's one option. And the other one is just going, you know, school by school, department by department, and you know, counting the number of female instructors. Yeah, but yeah, that would be, try to do something like that, but we didn't get we didn't get authorization to ask for the records, for all the records of courses taken by students.
So we have a question from Thais Barcelos.
Yes, I asked her to unmute.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my question is about like the students when choose have 10 options of university, but they have to choose economics always, or they can choose like a other subject like accounting and economics in different universities, and you have like different options. Because my concern is, even the beginning, when the student just start the course of economics, we have like more sexist students than the other course, and so you can just check it if the student which are in the second option, like accounting, for example, but you do like economics in the first option, if this student is on sexist also.
Yeah, that's very interesting. First, you can do whatever you want with your application, right? You can have econ at the top school and then do arts in any school and then go back to econ and then engineering, and then you can mix all that you want in the application. It doesn't need to follow or be always economics. It's really the way you want. So it's totally free. Typically, we have studied the strategies, like application strategies, and some people do, you know, I do econ. I know I want econ, so I will go, you know, econ in the top school and the second one and the third and so on, right? So they will use all their slots on econ. Others are not very sure. They say, oh, you know, I want to study at the University of Chile or Católica, right? And they just go all majors, you know, accounting, etc. So they go from most demanding major to the others within that school. So there's several strategies. And we wanted to use that in a smarter way, if you want, and we wanted to construct an instrument based on basically more or less what you are suggesting. The problem is we don't have a very large sample in order to do so. So first, I didn't mention this, but not all students gave us authorization to merge their survey with the administrative records. Okay, so then we have some attrition, and then it's not a super large sample, so that's why I cannot do something more sophisticated along the lines you're mentioning. But yeah, so we wanted to do something like that. Are students different? The ones that for sure want economics, right? The ones that apply to economics throughout, than those that say they wanted University of Chile or Católica or whatever, and they started, from the most demanding, say, medicine, and then, they did engineering, and then they ended up in economics just because, they wanted University of Chile, for instance. That would be, so we tried something like that, but we don't have enough power. Yeah.
Anna, do you want to make a question?
Yes, congratulations for the study is very interesting. If I'm not wrong, and please correct me, the gender bias or sexism for male, the treatment effect, right?
Correct.
And for female come from selection effect, right?
Correct.
Could you point out some reasons for this differences, like social norms for women, and maybe is there some heterogeneity in Chilean universities regarding the line of research, like possibly one is more orthodox or mainstream, and the other one's more heterodox? I don't know, like, can you guess the difference for these different effects?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question, and tough because I don't have a very good answer. We haven't been able to really point down exactly why for males there seems to be a treatment effect, and why it's really selection that seems to be happening, at least for women. So I would say the only hypothesis we have been able to elaborate is that for selection it seems to be quite correlated with the with political spectrum, right? So it could be that women that are getting into economics are probably more coming from more conservative backgrounds. That's how it looks like, because once you control for political orientation, then selection seems to go away. So it seems to be much smaller. So that would be what I could elaborate, but it's we don't have really a good answer for that.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. I'm sorry to, maybe I could be invasive, but what's your opinion about the Gary Becker's quote?
It looks sexist to me. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah. I think that's a conditional sentence. Okay, if there's like a comparative advantage, so he's like Gary Becker is defending himself, like he puts in a conditional way. So, but another question is like, is Gary Becker a sexist? I think that's maybe this can generate some confusion about the theory, Gary Becker's theory, and because a lot of people think and that Gary Becker was not was kind of conservative, so I think some people can mix.
So I can think of a couple of things there. So one is that we have another quote for Gary Becker in the paper, And it's the one about, you know, discrimination in the long run. So he didn't believe that discrimination didn't exist in the long run. So he says something like, you know, okay, this is what the theory says, but no way, there's no discrimination, right? So,
Okay.
so and then of course we're just taking one single quote out of the whole book, just to you know, highlight the issue. But I think the second thing I wanted to mention is that it's more of the way we, as you know, as scholars and also as teachers, you know, we interpret these results, and we give students how to. The students need to digest this, right? So this they read this, and they really need some interpretation. And I think that's a role for us, like to really help them interpret this and put it into context, and yeah, give them the tools to analyze this properly.
Yeah, it's a really good way to motivate, yes, and to stimulate. Okay, congrats again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Anyone? It's now or never?
No, never. I'm hoping to come back.
We have a lot of congrats comments here, messages.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Paula wrote, you should run the survey with the faculty members too. I think, yes. I was thinking about that.
Yeah, this is something we have thought about, and yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm going to thank you, Francisco, for being here. Hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. The next paper.
Yes. Thank you very much. And that's it. Solange and I would like to thank everyone for their participation. See you all next week at the first Brazilian meeting in Family and Gender Economics. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
bye, everyone.